So we were talking a few minutes ago about the shul that we went to here. And I said I was delightfully surprised at how much I enjoyed it. I was a little nervous. And I remember last year or 2 years ago, even in one of our classes, referring to this phenomenon of looking forward all year to the melodies that we sing just once a year, like you look forward to seeing an old friend. Mm-hmm. And yes, I missed beloved, cherished melodies, but it's nice to know you can make new friends as well. There were a couple of melodies, and as I said, the congregation sang beautifully together as well. Now, we continue talking about change and repentance as we look forward to Yom Kippur. And it might have been Esther who mentioned last week what genuine tshuva is, repentance. It's when you're in that same situation and you don't repeat the mistake you had made earlier. Now, I'm about to relate something that I'm only half bringing it up in a humorous way, but it's actually very serious. There's a lot of discussion here still about the goings-on of the British royalty and too much about Harry and William, et cetera, et cetera. But today's discussion I found interesting because of our time of year. And they're saying it's possible that Harry and William will resolve their conflict. But what will be essential is that Harry is going to have to sacrifice something. And what would that something be? If you're aware of that he's about to publish his memoirs. And those memoirs apparently are not pretty. And apparently, especially about the present Queen, Camilla. And so they're saying, especially Tina Brown, that if Harry really wants to show that he wants the conflict to be resolved, he's going to have to give up on what he's been looking and anticipating to publish and distribute. So it'll be interesting to see how sincere he is. What do you think, quickly? Because this is on our topic. What do you think he'll do?
If he's smart, he'll omit it.
All right, I guess we'll see.
No, if he wants to be king, he has to create a peace atmosphere and not a friction.
Well, if that will be his reasoning, that's not fully genuine, I guess. Now, and this is really a segue into our continued discussion today. Those of us who hosted no doubt received gifts. I received a very, very special gift. And I don't know if you can see it. If I show you here, it's a bag, and it was given to me by my sister, who I might have mentioned, convinced me over a month ago to start up with Pilates. And I'm doing it twice a week.
Good for you.
Yes. Amazing for me. And that's my point. So she presented that at the end of the first evening as a thank you. Now, why I would not bring that up if I was looking to focus just on me personally. But you have no idea, or maybe some of you do, what that took to get me to begin this. And that is a change. And change is not always easy. And there are different types of change and breaking with the past. And please God, I shall continue on that path for many, many years. It's a wonderful gift. We should all have something like that in our lives. Okay.
It shows very nice attitude on your part.
A very nice attitude. Well, I was also being threatened, not just by my sister, but my daughter. And anyway, okay. But now that the beginning is in the past, it's easier to move forward. Okay. Now, I'm going to share our screen. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who makes firm the steps of man or woman. This is taken from the daily opening brachot of Birchot HaShachar in the morning. Now, there's a list: who opens my eyes, who frees my muscles, who clothes me. And before it was put into the Siddur, and now the Machzor, people used to say these blessings at home. And as they awoke, they would say the bracha that was associated with the action. And so therefore, this bracha was said when people would put on their shoes. And shoes give you a sense of security, especially if you're walking outside on ground that is a little rocky, literally and metaphorically. So we are blessing God and thanking him for giving us this ability to walk securely. Now, when don't we wear shoes?
On Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur.
Okay, and what other time? And as Tzipora said, when you're mourning. Now,
Okay, but
on Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, you can wear a shoe, but just not
Leather.
leather. Now, you know by now that symbols, concrete symbols, whether, remembering to last week, whether it's food items or it's different rituals and actions, I find them incredibly important and have a potential for great impact on concretizing an idea, both for children and for adults. Actions do that, not just ideas and thoughts. So the question is, why don't we wear shoes that are made of leather on those occasions? Tisha B'Av when we're mourning, and Yom Kippur when we are not mourning. But there are 5 actions that we do or we don't do, and not wearing leather is one of them. And I want to assist us by looking at one of the sources for this tradition, looking at our Melech David in Sefer Shmuel, And the context is that sad for David, one of his sons, Avshalom, is trying to do away with him. And David is aware of this. And David went up by the ascent of the Mount of Olives, Har HaZeitim, weeping as he went up. And he had his head covered, and he went barefoot. And of all the people that were with him, every man covered his head, weeping as they went up. Of course, he was distressed. A son and father relating like that. So it is no wonder that we remove our shoes when the ground below us is shaky. Again, metaphorically and literally. And at such a time as Yom Kippur, we are in limbo, so to speak. And that's a symbol of that sensation. In particular, Noam Zion of the Hartman Institute, who I've studied with, says leather shoes symbolize the status symbols of physical and psychological security that both a mourner
Just a minute.
and one who fasts on Yom Kippur.
But my
Shoot.
page is on her class. How do I?
Now, having said, we're grateful for the firm grounding shoes give us. As we last week submitted, we don't wish to remain inert. As human beings, we know that we are on a dynamic path, hopefully on a ladder from one degree of goodness, spirituality, always going higher. But always progressing, moving. Now, we even alluded to God evolving last week and changing without taking anything away from his omnipotence, etc., etc. Now, I want you to look carefully at these words before we look at our next notion. So regel, and I've put in English letters for anyone who doesn't read Hebrew. Regel. So one, what's one meaning of regel?
Foot.
Foot. What is the second meaning of regel?
To spy.
L'ragel. Okay. Yes, rigul. Anything else?
Habit.
Well, that's going to come in the next hergel. Okay. Maybe we're more familiar.
What about regilut?
Rather,
Regilut.
sorry?
What about regilut? Lashon hara.
Rechilut. Rechilut with a chaf.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Hey, you're allowed.
Rules.
I have a license to forget.
Maybe you're more familiar. What do we call Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot?
Or shlosha regalim. The three
Shalosh regalim.
Yeah.
Because, and it means festivals, and the source of that is a long, long time ago, people from all over Eretz Israel would make pilgrimage to Yerushalayim on those Shalosh regalim. So let's keep that in mind. One of my favorite things about Ivrit is the way words are built from the same shorish root.
Mhm.
Now, as Nechama said, you can see, even if you don't really read Hebrew, you can see that these same three letters, Resh Gimel Lamed, as regel, and hergel means habit.
Yeah.
Then ragil, you can see again, the resh, the gimel, the lamed means regular. And that's a whole other topic. Words that sound alike in the Hebrew and the English. Ragil, regular. I'll do that another time. Now, why do I bring this to you? On the one hand, I said we want to feel firm. And we're not suggesting, if we're firm in beliefs, that we quickly change our beliefs, throw out something. No, if it's wrong, yes. But within a certain framework, we can be flexible, begin to see something a little differently. Or are we looking, as I ask here, sometimes to be flexible? Now, look at these psukim from the beginning of Shmot, Exodus, when Moshe actually notices the sneh, the burning bush. And God says to him the following: the Lord saw that he had turned to see, and that meant a lot to God. We've said this before. Moshe actually noticed something. He took the time to notice something. And God called to him from within the thorn bush, and he said, Moshe, Moshe. And he said, Hineni, here I am. And God said, do not draw near here.
With your shoes.
Take your shoes off your feet. Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha, because the place upon which you stand is holy soil. Okay.
By the way, Bracha, I went to a Hindu temple, and there too they have to.
For Rosh Hashanah?
No. I'm saying that they too have to take their shoes off when they get into their temple.
Mhm.
So do the Muslims.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Noam Zion brings this marvelous perush. The Hasidic Rebbe Moshe from Kobrin identified a spiritual pun in the Hebrew message with which God greeted Moshe at the burning bush in the desert. Remove not just your shoes from your feet, but remove yourself from your raglecha, from your regular habits that you have acquired by repeated travel on the same well-worn paths. I want to read that again.
Mm-hmm.
Remove not just your shoes from your feet, but remove yourself from your raglecha, the regular habits that you have acquired by repeated travel on the same well-worn paths. And we can all relate to that, whatever path it is, and habits that have remained with us. The Rebbe Moshe learned from the experience of his namesake, Moshe Rabbeinu, that once you remove yourself from habitual thinking, you will see that the place on which you stand, your standing or your stage, madrega or rung of spiritual development, is itself sacred soil.
Beautiful.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah. And this is something, again, the reason for why I took the time to speak about, and it's not silly, because it's for health, etc., etc. So there are different types and on different levels, habits that we think the older we get. And I can already know that that's true, that it's difficult to change certain things, but hopefully things that are for our benefit and for our family's benefit, our friends' benefit, our community's benefit, our nation's and our world's benefit, we invest in. How long did it take us to get into separating our garbage, et cetera, et cetera? So we could make a list of things. Okay, now, as I've just said, change ain't easy, even for young people. If we return for a moment to our earlier discussion of last week regarding God's 13 midot, his 13 attributes of mercy. You remember, not from last week, but from a couple of days ago, or was that just yesterday? Yes. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun. Yes. Now, you see how wonderful these tunes are? Some of you would sing it again today. Yeah. Okay. Now, and our focus on God as a model of change. Remember, we said following the horrific episode of the Egel HaZahav, the golden calf, how furious he was, and yet he is able to change from that anger to compassion. Now, let me ask you, and I'll give you a moment to think. What is the motivating factor behind changes you decide to embrace? Again, what is the motivating factor behind changes you decide to make? Anyone?
To improve yourself.
Okay, you want to improve yourself. Anyone else?
When your health is bad.
Okay. Okay. Wanting to improve your health. Improving yourself is general. Improve your health. Somebody else.
Someone close to you has asked you to make a change. Someone you love.
Is that Rita?
No, it's Sarah.
Sarah, I'm sorry. Okay. You sounded like her. Yes, absolutely. Somebody who cares about you and you care about, you do it for them because it's painful to them that you're not doing it. Yes.
Yeah, that's
Anybody
I
else?
think fear.
Fear. The truth is, go on.
No, I think, somebody may do something because somebody else close to them feels that it's necessary, and it helps them make the move. But I think that a real motivator is when somebody's just scared and they really need a good shock.
And sometimes you have no choice.
Yes, Frida. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you don't do it, something bad will happen.
Okay.
I think as we mature, our values change, what's important, what's not so important, and that causes us to change our behavior.
As well. But you do often hear that it took a doctor to scare me, so that's why I've made this change. So we've heard fear of hurting ourselves, fear, as Sarah said, of disappointing a loved one, wanting to improve ourselves, not just regarding health. Yafet. Anybody else?
Also, wanting to help others, family members, grandchildren be more effective in their lives. So you try different things to change how you are behaving to relate to them.
Wonderful answer, Shirley Ann. Yeah. If one strategy hasn't worked or the way you are, if you can gather up the ability to do something different, yeah, excellent. Yeah.
You know what, Bracha, sometimes, I
Marlene.
mean, these have all been very personal changes.
Yes.
Sometimes the hardest things to do are to change attitudes that will improve the community.
Absolutely. Do you want to elaborate? And I don't mean
No,
name,
I think that, you know, if you're very often, if you are involved in organizations or you are a community person, you see that changes are necessary in order for whatever you're doing to become better.
Also, Bracha, I think it depends who we are dealing with, because very often you have to change knowing who you're talking to or who you're dealing with.
Of course. Of course. Listen, we just talked of Moshe, and we know that at one point, God says, you know, I don't know that you'll be able to change. And now we need a different type of leader for where the community is at now. Of course, their specifics have to come into the whole process of change. How's it going to affect you? How's it going to affect the people you're dealing with? Short term, long term. Absolutely. And if I'm making a change for the community within me, how is that going to affect the people that live with me? All of these things. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a very important point.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to share with you a text from the Talmud that Talmudic scholar Ruth Calderon, I don't remember if it was last year or already 2 years ago, that we studied a book of hers with Talmudic tales, real life situations. And here she shares with us the following, and you'll understand why I have included it. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Yossi, how do we know that the Holy One, blessed be he, prays? Because it says, God talking, I will bring them to my holy mountain, and I will cause them to be happy in my house of prayer. You have that on top of your Aron Kodesh. Ki beitzi tefillah. Okay, look at it the next time you're there. I will cause them to be happy in my house of prayer. It does not say their house of prayer, but my house of prayer. From here we see that the Holy One, blessed be he, prays. Okay, now, the more important point. What does he pray? I could have asked you that before, as I tend to. You know, what would you imagine God would pray for? But I didn't, and we're already into this text. What does he pray? Rav Zutra, son of Tuvia, said, a second, Daniel had to leave, so I'm admitting anybody who's still coming in. Okay. What does he pray? Rav Zutra, son of Tuvia, said in the name of Rav, let it be my will that my mercy suppresses my anger, and that my mercy prevail over my other attributes, and that I deal with my children with the attribute of mercy, and that I deal with them beyond the letter of the law. Now, there's a lot in what God is saying here. Now, first of all, that relates to the 13 midot, and God is accepting that transition that he is making. But what's interesting also, he says, I deal with them beyond the letter of the law. What does that mean?
That morality very often surpasses the law. You can be halachically right and morally wrong.
Okay, all right. And I'm doing more than what legally is demanded of me. In other words, when you go beyond the letter of the law, lifni mishurat hadin, like Ruth did with Naomi, when you do that, or let's put it this way, if I don't help somebody in need, a person crossing the street who needs help, I can't be fined or put into jail, but it would be nice to not just be concerned about what I have to legally do, but beyond what legally is required of me. Okay. Now the text.
Nechama, would you consider what happened with Tamar? That he admitted that he was wrong. He didn't have to admit it.
Well, there are different ways of looking at that. Whether you could call him going beyond when he had done something like that. I'm sorry, for another time, but a very good question, Esther.
Bracha, I think that it's very interesting that the word mercy is used 3 times in this short paragraph.
Go ahead.
I think that is, and I actually read, because I'm doing a little bit of Daf Yomi today, about the strictness of the law as opposed to rachamim and mercy, which should go beyond the law.
Good for you.
Yeah.
You got to get a life, Marlene. This is all you do all day, huh?
Bracha, I have a question.
Wait, 1 second, Elliot, 1 second. Okay. That is what you just said, Marlene. That's the constant between midat harachamim and midat hadin, exactly. And God realized after he thought people were going to be perfect, that he's got to balance. Now, that doesn't mean you do away with din. There's a time for justice, but you also have to consider, and there is a time for rachamim. Yes, Elliot.
Yes, the bracha, if Hashem is praying, to whom is he praying? Who is the recipient of his prayers? Is he praying to himself?
Well, sometimes
looking at his own conscience.
Beautiful answer to your question. Now, you're going to see something very shortly. But we all can say a prayer to ourselves, saying, please make sure I do this. Please let me not do that.
Rabbi Warnick made a prayer yesterday, I'm sure. He said, please, Avinu Shebashamayim, keep Putin away from us.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
You say Avinu Shebashamayim, and then you pray for whatever. Rabbi Warnick yesterday said, Avinu Shebashamayim, keep Putin away from us.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so now it goes on the text. Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha said, once, this is going to be very bizarre, once I entered into the Holy of Holies to burn incense in the innermost sanctum, the Holy of Holies. And I saw a chatriel, Yah Hashem Tzvaot. That is a phrase as a representative of God or an angel, or maybe God himself, sitting on a high and lofty throne of compassion. And God said to me, Elliot, listen, Yishmael, my son, bless me. God is saying to this human being, even if he is a Kohen Gadol, he's still saying to a human being, bless me. And I said to him, Yehi ratzon milfanecha, sheyichbeshu rachamecha et ka'ascha, v'yigolu rachamecha al midotecha, v'titnahek im banecha b'midat harachamim, v'tikanes lahem lifnim mishurat adin. Master of the universe, may it, this is the human being talking to God, may it be your will that your mercy conquer your anger, that your mercy overcome your sterner attributes, that you behave toward your children with the attribute of mercy, and that for their sake, you go beyond the letter of the law. He nodded to me. God nodded with his head. And this comes to teach us. The Gemara says that the blessing given by an ordinary person should never be taken lightly. Now, what stimulus for change is suggested in this text? Take a moment to reread even just this last part, Master of the Universe. And what is the stimulus? What is the stimulus for change that's being suggested? Everybody read it, reread it to yourselves before we suggest something.
To me, the word mercy jumps up. With mercy, you should conquer your anger, your way you talk to your children. So it's control of your temper and for the better.
Okay, but I'd like to phrase it a little differently. What's going to cause you? Here, God is making a change, and human beings are asking God to make that change, but God asked for it, for us to bless him. But something very specific toward the end of this text. And it's so important because, as we said, Yom Kippur does not atone for sins or conflict between human beings. It's up to us to straighten that out. And that definitely has to do with what I see as the stimulus that is explicitly said in this text toward the end. Anyone?
The last sentence. The blessing given by ordinary person should never be taken lightly.
Okay. Yes. Anyone else want to refer to that?
Yes.
And that was in the book that I had with Kevin Naughton's insurance.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I showed that certificate.
Please mute yourselves. Daniel is not here anymore. I can't do that. Please, we're hearing somebody we shouldn't be hearing.
For the house insurance, having an alarm.
Male perlmutters, mute yourselves.
Thank you. Okay, now, look at this last line. yes, I said he's a Kohen, but compared to God, he's just an ordinary person. Now think of the good. Now it might sound simplistic, but no. We know that there are different strategies toward suggesting to someone that a change on his or her part would be a good idea. And we've even joked that no longer is a teacher permitted to punish. There's a consequence, not a punishment, but also there are ways that you talk to another person that will, rather than make him afraid, even though sometimes that's what it takes, but that you say something to them that would be a positive encouragement. Now, not only that, here you have, again, an ordinary person. In the Talmud, it says hedyot, a lay person trying to talk and encourage God to make a change. Now, interestingly, Ruth Calderon, in her discussion of this topic, shares with us a wonderful anecdote. I think it was in 2009, Leonard Cohen of Canadian fame came to Israel and performed in a suburb of Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan Stadium. He performed for between 47,000 and 50,000 people. And she said that she happened to pass him at the end of the concert, and it was a treat. And when she complimented him with a thoughtful compliment, she then thought to herself, wow, what's my compliment as somebody who's not musical going to mean to this professional musician? And she went back to him because she was thinking that, and she likes to talk to people. And he said, are you kidding? I love it when just listeners talk to me and say something about my music. They're looking at it from a different point of view, and I have what to gain from it. And sometimes we underestimate our ability to impact on another person.
Well, Nechama, I was thinking to the days when I was teaching, and there was a kid in my class, grade 1, who had terrible handwriting. So instead of saying something about that, I said, you know, sweetheart, you read so beautifully. If you write as well as you read, you'll be perfect. Well, that kid tried so hard.
Yes.
Because of the way, just because of the way it was said to him.
Mm-hmm. Now, again, why I feel this need, but I do, and maybe Marlene will have what to say about this, but the balance between justice and mercy, it's has to be considered. We can't throw out standards. We can't. Now, just an aside, Avinu Malkeinu, that's an interesting combination, an image that on the one hand, we stand before this all-powerful God, and we first address him as Abba. And with our own personal dad, we would have a more intimate sense of closeness, even though a dad can also have midat hadin and should at times, as well as a mother. But then we also go back to Malkeinu, Hamelech Shalanu, that he's our king, who you certainly have a sense of awe and maintain a certain distance. And as you also know about me, that's a constant dynamic balancing, going between different ways of looking at God, looking at us and our relationship with God. Okay, so we have said, just to repeat, that Yom Kippur is not going to take care of conflicts that we have had with another human being. And we still have time to discuss that with anyone that we should be talking with, apologizing or explaining a misunderstanding. It takes work, as we just said. In the next text that we're going to read, keep in mind, look for what in this next text hints at why human understanding and sympathy for another is so difficult. Now, the text that we're going to be looking at is taken again from Talmudic stories, and Noam Zion brings this to us. And these two stories that we're going to look at, to be very practical, are adapted, taken from the Talmud, but given his own twist by Israeli poet Admiel Kosman. So, again, what is the reason given here for it being very difficult to always have peace between people? The tale of Rabbi Tanchuma. In the days of Rabbi Tanchuma, whose name means Rabbi Compassion, from Menachem or Nechama, the people, Israel, needed a fast. Now, why? The background is they were experiencing a drought. And certainly then they believed that prayers would bring an end to the drought. Israel needed a fast. They also felt not just prayers, but fasting. So they went to him, Rabbi Tanchuma, and said, Master, Rabbi, proclaim a fast. He proclaimed a fast for one day, then a second day, and then a third day, yet no rain fell. Thereupon he, Rabbi Tanchuma, entered the assembly and preached to them, saying, My sons, be filled with compassion for each other, and then the Holy One, blessed be God, will be filled with compassion for you. Now, while they were distributing tzedakah to their poor, they saw some man named so-and-so give coins to his divorced wife. Pay attention to the details. Then they went to him, Rabbi Tanchuma, and exclaimed, Master, what are you doing sitting here distributing tzedakah when such misdeeds are being perpetrated here? They were angry with the rabbi for not doing something with this man who was giving his ex-wife tzedakah. Rabbi Tanchuma, said, "What do you see?" They told him, "We saw some man named so-and-so give his divorced wife coins. He summoned them, literally, sent after them, and brought them into the public assembly. He, Rabbi Tanchuma, interrogated him. 'Who is she for you?' He replied, 'She is my divorced wife.' He, Rabbi Tanchuma, asked, 'So why did you give her coins?' He replied, 'Because I saw her in distress, and I was filled with compassion for her.'" You don't very often hear that in these situations. However, at that moment, Rabbi Tanchuma raised his face upward and exclaimed, "Master, Rabban of all the worlds, if this one who has no obligation to give that one alimony saw her in distress and was filled with mercy, love for her, then you," I'm sorry, I'm letting somebody in. "Then you, of whom it is written, Adonai is compassionate and merciful. As the Father shows mercy to his sons, Adonai shows mercy to those who fear God, and for us who are your children, the children of your beloved, the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, how much the more should you be filled with mercy?" Immediately, the rain descended and the world enjoyed relief. What is the message that's being given here? What was the problem with the people who came running to Rav Tanchuma upset that this man was giving his ex coins? What was their problem?
They couldn't understand true tzedakah.
Okay, they couldn't understand why he would. And what did they assume? What do you think they were assuming? Because they couldn't possibly imagine that a divorced couple could be compassionate with each other. What did they immediately assume when they saw him giving her coins?
But he has an ulterior motive.
An ulterior motive? Maybe they're not married. The Talmud goes into this. Maybe he's paying her for services. The Talmud brings this to show how people tend, first of all, to not go beyond the letter of the law, but also in relating to people, jump to conclusions.
Misjudge.
Misjudging.
Not only do they misjudge, but they're doing Lashon Hara.
Absolutely, Brenda.
Yeah. She could also be the mother of his children. He would have to have some compassion for her in that case as well.
And they should have realized that, thought of that. Absolutely. Because not every father does have that compassion. But that's the point of this, that in trying to relate to people, it's very, very difficult because we don't think to ourselves. We jump too fast. We don't try to give the benefit of the doubt, etc., etc.
Never assume.
Okay.
The other thing,
Marlene.
the other,
Yes.
the other thing that it shows basically is the power of one, and how if one person can do something that changes the outcome for everybody.
Essential. And nobody should think, because I'm only one, that I shouldn't attempt to do that. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. Another obstacle to people relating appropriately, another Talmudic tale. Act 1, sacred hospitality and access to the holiday table. One day, on the eve of Yom Kippur, he, Satan, disguised himself as a pauper and came and knocked on his door. Whose door? A man in the Talmud who's called Polemo. And he was considered to be a pious person, certainly behaved according to religiosity. Now, he's knocking on the door of this home and they're about to have their Su'udah Mafseket before the fast begins. Okay, now, he knocks on the door. Bread was brought out to him so that he would eat outside. Now, pay very, very close attention to every description and every detail. We have a family, Polemo's family, eating inside their fine home, and they agreed to give this beggar food, but on the outside. He, now they don't know that he's Satan, asked them, on such a day as today, one that is as special and important as Yom Kippur Eve, the entire world is inside, but I shall remain to eat alone outside? They brought him in and set bread before him so that he could eat inside the house, but not at the table where all were dining. He said to them, on such a day as today, the entire world is at the table, but I am alone. So they brought him and sat him at the table. As he sat, he raised on his body sores which discharged pus, and he engaged in repulsive behavior, probably pinching these sores. They said to him, sit properly, behave politely, and not in a manner that disgusts people. He said to them, give me a glass. And they gave him a glass. He coughed and spat his phlegm into it. They berated him for this behavior, and then he fell dead. They, Polemo, and the members of his household heard people shouting, Polemo has killed a man. Polemo has killed a man. Second act. And by the way, Satan is often a messenger of God. Act 2, shedding disguises, the revelation and the lesson. What does Polemo do? He hears people outside accusing him of murder. He, Polemo, fled, and where does he go? Not to shul, and hid in the public latrine. And he, Satan, who had only pretended to die, followed him. He, Polemo, fell before him. When he, Satan, saw how he, Polemo, was suffering, he revealed himself. He, Satan, said, why did you speak thus? And this was the line that prompted God to send Satan, because this Polemo would always say, an arrow in Satan's eyes, which in other words means that Polemo felt that he could no longer be tempted. He was on such a high level that nothing could go wrong with him. He was at the highest dargah of spirituality. He, Satan, said, why did you speak thus, daring me daily with the words an arrow in Satan's eyes? Polemo replied, then how should I have spoken? He, Satan, said to him, my Lord should have said, may the merciful one, God, rebuke Satan. Now, what was the obstacle here? Polimo's immense self-confidence in his spiritual power, and that led him to use that expression. But let's look at some of these details. Mind-boggling, incredible. What was wrong, as we've suggested before, religiously pious, and yet they don't know how to treat the poor person. But beyond that, the sense of the poor person being on the outside, not permitted on the inside. Those insiders never take a look at the outsiders, the poor, and feel, just as we mentioned last week, that they can pray 3 times a day, but not know how to behave between people. Polimo and nobody else sitting there opens their heart. And perhaps they feel a little guilt, and that's why they bring him to the table. But Satan brings down his mask, and perhaps Polimo will realize that it's only externally that he is pious. And he has an empty trust in his religious lifestyle. And isn't it fascinating? Who saves Polimo?
Satan.
Satan. And what's even more fascinating, where does that saving take place? Not in the sanctuary on Bayview Avenue or Beth, you said, Rabbi Wernick, on Bathurst Street, and not here on Rehov Eliyahu Lincoln, but in a latrine. Think of that imagery. Think of that.
But the
Now,
family was actually shamed into different behavior.
Well, sometimes that has to happen. And it turns out that this was to their benefit, hopefully, and Polimo's, that this happened and they acted the way they did, so that it opened up the opportunity for them to learn and hopefully be influenced. Now, as we are getting close to concluding, I said I wanted to also, in our promotion, mention a Rabbi Yehuda Amital, who at 85 died, I think in 2010. He was the head of one of the most important study institutes, yeshivot, in Alon Shvut, an incredible man. And people talk of the dual nature of Yom Kippur. And if I say that, what do you think I mean? What would be the dualism within Yom Kippur?
Could it be that according to some people, it's the saddest, heaviest time of the year, but in others' eyes, it's a day to rejoice because God has forgiven you. He'll make your sins as white as snow.
Absolutely, Elliot. Absolutely.
Because I said that Yom Kippur is one of the 2 days in the year of joy.
Yeah. Yes. Now that's interesting because it's very, very serious. But if you think about it also, certainly over Rosh Hashanah, lively, what seems to be simcha, simcha, and even on Yom Kippur.
What I find interesting is that in the prayer of Yom Kippur, it's not individual, but it's all the society. It's anachnu.
Well, for sure. And that is another topic that we don't just think of ourselves, Never, not just on Yom Kippur, but we say prayers in the plural. Even if we're not sick, we say Rifa'enu. Okay, now, so that is the dual nature. But in Israel, there's something else that comes into play. Most, if not all, as soon as they think of Yom Kippur, they also think of 1973 and the Yom Kippur War. And people will suggest, connected to what was just said here, that it's an association because you have people who gave their lives personally for Klal Yisrael, not just thinking of themselves. We are meant, as we talk about the difficulty of building relationships and fixing relationships, what's got to be embedded in us is a sense of not just caring for what's going to be with me, but what's going to be with everyone.
And I find it interesting that
Amital says the following when he was addressing soldiers and soldiers that were from his yeshiva, and initially during the war he lost 8 of his students. And he says the following. It says in Tehillim, God is near to all those who call him, to all who call him in truth. Anyone who truly calls, whether religious or not, neither I, as a Rosh Yeshiva, head of the school, nor my students and friends, your comrades at arms, represent God any more than you do. Whose prayer comes nearer to God, the prayer of someone like me who was trained in it from childhood, or your prayer which you discovered in the heat of battle. Only God knows. A sincere prayer that originates in the depths and flows forth from there, even if the words are stammered, is heard at the highest heights. King David wrote in one of the Tehillim, God, listen in to my voice. Hashem, Shema Bikoli. May your ears be attentive to the sound of my supplication. A great Hasidic master once pointed out that it does not say, listen to my voice, Shema Koli, rather, listen into my voice, Shema Bikoli, listen to what is hidden within the notes of my voice, what I could not articulate in words, says Rabbi Yehuda Amital. And this goes for people who say sometimes, we're meant to pray minaleh from the heart. How can I do that if I'm looking at words printed in a machzor that aren't my words? Well, we know there are reasons for that, so that we can all pray together, literally be on the same page. Also to connect us with those in the past, those in the present, those in the future. And also we won't always be able to articulate. But friends, there is so much time to feel an emotion and express it in your own words or just in how you're saying or singing the words of the machzor, and to give your heartfelt sense of meaning what you're saying. Now, I want to close with the following. We talked in the beginning about shoes. When my dear father, Rabbi Avi Shafran, writes, may he live and be well, showed me his new shofar shoes. I was reminded of how uniquely Jews steeped in Jewish tradition look at the world. It was about 3 years ago, several hours before the arrival of Yom Kippur. My family and I had the wonderful privilege of spending the high holidays in Baltimore with my father and his wife. His mother had died a number of years before. Before he showed me the shoes, he recounted how his old cloth Yom Kippur shoes, leather footwear is forbidden on the Jewish Day of Atonement, had grown uncomfortable. These new shofar shoes, however, he explained, were much better. He is someone, without question, who can appreciate a good shoe. As a child in a Polish shtetl, the only shoes he ever had were those first worn and outgrown by older siblings. To this day, he attributes his size 6 triple E feet to the confining, ill-fitting footwear of his youth. Oh, there was a store he could have gone to. And during the years of World War II, when he and his yeshiva colleagues found themselves unwilling guests of Joseph Stalin in a Siberian labor camp, the frigid temperatures made foot covering a matter not of comfort, but of life or death. He recalls how he and his friends would wrap long pieces of cloth in layers around their feet for insulation. So many things, I pondered, are so different when regarded through deeply Jewish eyes. My father blows the shofar at his shul on Rosh Hashanah. The blasts of the ram's horn call all who hear them, in Maimonides' words, to awaken sleepers from your slumber, to reject the silly distractions of the temporal world we occupy, to focus on what alone is real, serving our Creator and being good to one another, to see the world, in other words, through Jewish eyes. No wonder my father was so happy to discover that the comfortable Yom Kippur shoes he had found were shofar shoes. I didn't understand at first what a shofar shoe was, though, and told him. He smiled and responded patiently. Why? Each one has a shofar on it. When I expressed skepticism, he went to his bedroom and emerged triumphantly with the footwear. And when he held them up for me to see, his Jewish eyes taught mine a lesson. I don't think I'll ever look at the blank quite the same way again. Who can fill in that blank?
The Nike swoosh.
Nike swoosh shoes. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's priceless.
Yes.
I also find it interesting that in the Machzor we find 3 different words for forgiveness. We have slicha, mechila, and kapara, which are just a little bit different from one another.
They are, but make sure that you do all 3, just as I will do all 3.
Try my best. That's all I can do.
Bracha,
yes.
I was really taken by the last bit, the last part that you read, not this story, the one about the Koli, because just having this summer finished the book that Mati Friedman wrote about Leonard Cohen's concerts during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Basically, that really is, when I think about it now, all about listening B'Koli, as opposed to, because the effect that he was having on other people and on the soldiers who were around him. They were really listening, Bikoli.
And that's exactly what the person who wrote the article that I referred to earlier in describing this concert that he gave in 2009, he said, very not true to an Israeli audience. Everyone sat there, 47,000 people listening. Thank you, Marlene. A beautiful ending. A beautiful ending.
I think something contradictory about Leonard Cohen. I think he had an absolutely horrendous voice, but an absolutely phenomenally beautiful voice. Were you referring before to davening with kavana, with intention, irrespective of the words, that is really connecting on the deepest levels to Hashem, intent?
Well, I was referring that people sometimes will question, how can you have kavana if they're not your own self-created words? But there are reasons, because we want, first of all, sometimes we're at a loss for words. Other times we want, it's so crucial to pray with others. And how would we physically be able to do that if we didn't have a set text, right? Now, but what I'm saying is, I noticed yesterday there were a couple of words, and I know Hebrew pretty well. I don't speak English. I don't think you would say pretty well, but anyway, but there were a couple of words that I did not know, and I've been davening for many years, and it occurred, I had this train of thought.